You're too poor to matter." That's what my son said while I was holding his favorite pie at a church fundraiser. He didn't say it to my face. He said it to a stranger, just loud enough for me to hear. That's when I realized they weren't helping me out of love. They were managing me out of convenience. I've spent 70 years making room for everyone else. Now I'm teaching women how to reclaim that space, starting with the truth. In this story, you'll see what I found in the attic safe, how I exposed the forged will, and why I stopped saving seats for people who only showed up when it benefited them. My own son rerouted my pension. My daughter skipped my birthday for a wine tasting. And still, I folded napkins, poured coffee, and waited until I didn't. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to take back your name, your voice, or your life, don't wait. What they forged in my name nearly erased me, but I wrote the ending. And you can too. Before we begin this story, I'd love to know, have you ever felt like you were showing up for people who stopped noticing? If you're a woman who's ever stayed silent to keep the peace, drop a 1 in the comments. And if you've started speaking up, even just a little, drop a 2. I see you. I'll be reading every number with care. Let's walk this journey together. You know it's not about you, right? That's what Adam said when he called. I hadn't even asked a question yet. The kitchen smelled faintly of yesterday's coffee and lemon soap. Outside, birds were busy making a mess of my front porch, but in here, it was quiet, except for the tick of the wall clock, a gift from my late husband. Sunday sunlight poured through the gingham curtains, landing in warm patches on the linoleum. I had just reheated my mug for the second time when the phone rang. Adam's name lit up the screen. I smiled before answering. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to smooth the excitement out of my voice. I'd heard Lindsay, his wife, had found a beach rental in Charleston. I assumed this was the call. "We've been thinking about the trip," he began, tone careful, like he was stepping around eggshells. I waited for the invite, for the laugh, for the warm, "You'll love the place, Mom." Instead, he sighed. "We're keeping it really simple this time, just us and the kids, no extras." Lindsay thought, well, we thought, it's probably just easier for everyone if it's adults only. You know how flights stress you out. I hadn't said a word about flights. Still, I nodded like he could see me. "Sure," I murmured. "Of course." He shifted tone like he was checking off a task. "Good. I knew you'd understand." Of course I would. I always had. We ended the call with polite goodbyes, and I stood at the counter for a long minute afterward, holding the phone like it still had something more to say. The kitchen was silent again, but the quiet had changed. It wasn't peace, it was absence. I didn't cry. Not then. I made toast, cut up strawberries, pretended it was a brunch for one by choice. I even added whipped cream from a can, like Adam used to love when he was little. Have you ever smiled through something that quietly shattered you? What happened next? It rewrote everything I believed about my family. If you're still here, drop a 5 in the comments, because what I saw on that screen changed more than my weekend plans, but the toast went cold while I scrolled through Facebook on my tablet, and that's where I saw it. A group photo on the Charleston Pier, Lindsay beaming, wind in her hair, Adam beside her, sunglasses tucked in his shirt collar, and in the center, my teenage grandson. Not adults only, after all. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I tapped it awake again, zoomed in, tried to find some reason, any reason, I wasn't in that photo, that I wasn't meant to be. I ate lunch at the diner down the road, took my favorite booth, the one that still had a little crack in the vinyl seat, 4 menus on the table. 4 sets of silverware. I didn't ask them to clear the extras. The waitress, Angela, sweet girl, asked, "Expecting company?" I smiled. Not today. Later that evening, I sat with a warm mug of chamomile when my landline buzzed. A voicemail from Eleanor. "Still haven't booked that cruise, huh?" she said, voice dry as ever. "What are you waiting for? Someone to give you permission?" I chuckled, but it caught in my throat. Eleanor and I had been friends since our nursing days. She'd raised 2 boys who barely called until she stopped picking up. Now she ran a quilting circle, hosted dinner parties, even took a ballroom class on Tuesdays. Her children weren't the center of her life anymore. She was. And me? I still scheduled my groceries around the idea Adam might drop by. I opened a box of old photos that night, found one of Adam in his cap and gown, me smiling behind him in scrubs. I'd missed the ceremony, picked up a shift because another nurse's daughter had gone into labor early. Adam never let me forget it, but I'd kept the photo anyway. I held it to my chest and whispered. I raised him to believe I'd always be available. And maybe that was the problem. If you stop showing up, do they even notice? I reached for my phone again, pulled up the Charleston photo, then I deleted it. The screen turned black, and for a moment I stared at it like it owed me something. "Will you be dining alone today?" the hostess asked. I nodded, smiling like it didn't sting. Yes, just me. It wasn't supposed to be. Table 7 sat by the window, as always, the same table we used for every family birthday, Julia's especially. I'd called ahead like I always did, told them 2 guests, asked for lemon pie instead of cake because that was her favorite growing up, even brought the pie myself, wrapped in foil, edges still warm. The hostess led me to the booth with a kind smile and left 2 menus, 2 waters, 2 sets of silverware. I didn't ask her to clear the other one. Hope is a strange thing. It stays longer than it should. I set the gift box next to her plate. Just something small, a scarf she'd once admired in a boutique window, yellow with tiny white orchids, like the ones in our old backyard. I imagined her laugh when she saw it. Instead, I sat across from her empty chair and listened to the low hum of jazz from the speakers above. Someone at the next table was celebrating. A child, maybe 7, bouncing in his seat while balloons bobbed above him. His parents sang softly as a slice of cake arrived with a flickering candle. I looked away before the candle went out. I kept checking my phone. Julia was late, but she was always a little late. 15 minutes, then 30. I sent a gentle text. Me. At the diner. They seated us already. Table 7. Nothing. The waitress came by. Her name tag said Clara. She had soft gray curls pulled into a clip and eyes that flicked to the second cup of coffee I hadn't touched. "She on her way?" she asked carefully. "I think so," I said, even though I didn't. She poured more coffee anyway and smiled. "It smells like lemon over here." I smiled. "Pie, Julia's favorite." Clara nodded. "Smells like someone put love into it." That's when my phone buzzed. Julia. "Sorry, Mom, something came up. Rain check?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened Instagram. Don't ask me why. Maybe I just wanted to see if she was okay. And there it was, a photo posted an hour ago. Julia, in a sundress, laughing beside a group of women I didn't know, glass of rosé in hand, a vineyard in the background. "Best birthday ever," the caption read, followed by pink hearts. She wasn't sick. She wasn't caught at work. She was wine tasting, with friends. My eyes burned. Not with anger, at least not yet. More with a hollow kind of ache, the kind that builds slowly like steam in a kettle. I glanced at the empty cup again, still full, still untouched. When Clara returned, I asked for the check. She looked at the second plate, untouched meal growing cold. "Would you like it to go?" "No," I said, a little too quickly. "Just, no." She returned a few minutes later and slipped the check onto the table. There was something scribbled at the bottom in neat handwriting. "You deserve better company." It nearly undid me. I folded the receipt and tucked it in my purse, took one last look at the gift, still unopened. I left it behind. As I stepped outside, the wind picked up, just enough to lift the scent of lemon from the pie still wrapped in foil. There was a trash bin by the curb. I didn't hesitate, dropped the pie right in, didn't look back. I walked slowly toward my car, the sidewalk warm underfoot. Jazz music from inside the diner spilled faintly out the door behind me. The thing is, I used to blame myself for Julia's distance, For the recital I missed when she was 12, the one where she danced in a red velvet dress and I was covering the ER because 2 nurses called out. I sent flowers. She never mentioned them. I thought showing up now would be enough, that birthdays could be bandages. But when did being there become not enough? Back in the car, I stared at my hands on the wheel. Then I called Eleanor. "I think I'm done chasing grown children," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. She's a liability, not an asset. Adam's voice floated through the kitchen pass-through, meant for dishes, not daggers. He wasn't talking to me. Of course not. He never said things like that to my face, just over my head, behind my back, or, like tonight, through thin walls that carried too much truth. I stood frozen, still holding the casserole dish I'd brought. Chicken divan, his favorite as a child. The smell of cheddar and broccoli wafted upward as if trying to soften the moment. It didn't. I had come early, dressed in my best navy blouse, the one with little pearl buttons. I even curled my hair. Adam had invited me to this dinner a week ago, made it sound special. "Just family, Mom. Thought it'd be good to have you around." I believed him. Now I stood in the hallway of his polished home, listening to my son plot a version of me I didn't recognize. "I'm telling you, Kate," he said to his wife, voice low but not low enough. "She's bleeding us dry, always some bill or little emergency. And it's not just money, it's time, space, energy." I heard the soft clink of a wine glass. Her voice followed, saccharine smooth. "Maybe it's time we simplify. She still has the house, right? That's got to be worth something." Then Adam again. "Exactly. If we get the paperwork in place, POA, medical directives, we can streamline things. Her memory's not what it was. You saw her at Christmas. She couldn't remember where she parked. That was one time. And it was snowing. And the lot was unmarked." My hands tightened around the casserole. The ceramic burned through the dish towel. Dinner went on as if I hadn't heard a word. The long table was set for 10. Candles flickered, napkins folded just so. I was seated at the far end between the pantry door and the thermostat, the kind of seat meant for someone who wouldn't speak unless spoken to. "Mom, this looks amazing," Adam said, taking the dish with a grin. "Everyone, this is my mom's famous casserole. Real comfort food." They clapped politely. Someone said, "Yum." I smiled thinly. My grandchild across the table gave me a look, wide eyes, almost apologetic. He saw me, I think. Or maybe he just felt the tension swirl around my chair like steam off a plate. Dinner continued. Conversation bounced from ski trips to stock options. No one asked about my week, or my garden, or anything that didn't cost money. Then came the toast. Kate stood, glass raised. To family, to new beginnings, and to building smart, sustainable futures for all of us. Everyone lifted their glasses, except me. No mention of the woman who raised Adam alone after his father passed. No word of gratitude for the woman who picked up extra shifts to afford his piano lessons, then sold the piano when he quit. I sipped water while the wine flowed around me. After dessert, I excused myself to the hallway, saying I needed a breather. The door to Adam's office was slightly ajar. Inside, the printer tray was still open. A single page sat there, face up. POA authorization, Margaret Andrews. I didn't touch it, just stared. My memory, he said. Maybe what they'd forgotten was that I was the one who remembered it all. I returned to the table, calm as the china on the hutch, picked up my fork, cut a clean slice through the pie on my plate, and said, loud enough to be heard, "You won't like the woman I become after tonight." A hush. Then the clatter of someone setting down a spoon. I didn't stay for coffee. Back in the foyer, I pulled out my phone, texted Eleanor. "Can you drive me home early? Something in me just cracked." I stood there, coat in hand, heart still lodged somewhere between shame and resolve. What does it take for them to see I still matter? Outside, the porch light buzzed softly against the evening air. I stepped out into it without saying goodbye. I smiled for the photo. Chin up, shoulders back, hands folded neatly in my lap. but inside, I was unraveling. The camera clicked. Julia beamed, Adam leaned in, and Kate lifted her glass like we were the kind of family that laughed over brunch and shared matching pajamas on Christmas morning. We weren't. The restaurant was one of those trendy downtown spots. Industrial lighting, terrarium centerpieces, piano covers of Beyoncé playing softly through speakers hidden behind potted fiddle leaf figs. The kind of place where the waitstaff wore suspenders and the menus didn't use dollar signs. It was Julia's birthday. She'd chosen the place. Kate had made the reservations. Adam was paying. I was invited, technically. I brought a small gift box wrapped in cream paper with a pale blue ribbon. Inside was an heirloom necklace, a delicate gold chain with a single teardrop pearl. It had belonged to my mother. I'd worn it to Julia's christening. Always thought I'd give it to her on a day that felt special. But when she arrived, she was already wearing a necklace. Shiny, sleek, modern. "A little something from Kate," she said, touching it lightly. "Isn't it perfect?" I slipped the gift box back into my purse before the bread arrived. The conversation was all light touches and curated smiles. Julia scrolled through her phone, showing pictures of her wine-tasting trip from the weekend. The same one she said she was too sick to skip brunch for the week before. Adam was playing the good son today, pulling out chairs, cracking jokes about Mom's famous tuna casserole, which hadn't been served in over a decade. Kate chimed in with little quips about Montessori this and screen time limits that each phrase designed to signal modern competence. I said little, ate less. Until Julia raised her glass. "I just want to thank everyone who made me feel like a real daughter today." The table clinked glasses. Kate kissed her cheek. Adam winked. No one looked at me. I swallowed the lump in my throat with a sip of lukewarm coffee. The grandchild, bless him, brought me a fresh cup without being asked. I smiled at him, genuinely. Then from the far end of the table, I heard Julia laughing with her cousin, low and easy. "Mom's sweet," she said, "but exhausting. It's easier when she just lets us be." The fork I held clinked against my plate. I excused myself and made my way through the maze of hanging plants and concrete walls to the restroom. Locked the door, leaned against it, breathed, cried silently into a scratchy paper towel that smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and someone else's perfume. I used to sew matching Easter dresses for us, mine in navy, hers in yellow. One year she cried in the car because the fabric itched. Told me later she'd never forgiven me for making her wear something so homemade. I thought I was giving her memories. Turns out, I was giving her stories to mock. When did my presence start to feel like pressure? By the time I returned to the table, dessert had arrived. A tiny cake with edible flowers. Julia posed for photos while I quietly reached for my purse. As I stood to leave, chair scraping gently across the polished floor, no one noticed. Not until I reached the door did I say, half to them, half to myself, "Next time, don't count me in." I wasn't looking for a secret, just a flashlight. The power had flickered twice, then gone completely. Rain tapped steady against the windows, wind rising like something was trying to claw its way through the attic walls. I kept the candles low and reached for the stairs, thinking of the emergency light tucked away in that old roll-top desk. The attic hadn't changed much in years. Sheets still draped over forgotten furniture, boxes labeled in black marker, Thanksgiving china, baby clothes, misc, photos. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of mothballs. I tugged my cardigan tighter as I knelt beside the desk. The drawer stuck. It always had. I jiggled the handle, gave it a gentle pull, and it gave way with a sigh. No flashlight, but something else. A manila envelope thick and slightly warped from humidity. My name scrawled in the upper corner, no return address. No label, just a sticky note slapped on the front in Julia's handwriting. "Don't forget to scan and send to Adam." At first, I thought it was old paperwork, maybe insurance forms or bank statements. But when I slid the contents out, my heart skipped. What would you do if you found your name on a document you never signed. If you've ever questioned how far family would go for control, this part may sit heavy. If you're still here, drop a 6 in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one who's looked betrayal in ink. It was a will, not my husband's, not mine either, not really, because I never signed it. Yet there it was, my typed name, my supposed intentions, and a neat little section at the bottom naming Adam as primary executor and sole decision-maker for remaining estate assets. Dated 2 years after my husband passed. There was even a notary stamp. But I'd never sat for it, never saw it, never agreed. I lowered myself onto the covered bench and sat in the dim attic, letting the storm echo around me. They wanted my silence notarized. The house creaked like it was listening. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I reached for my phone, scrolled to Eleanor's name. She picked up on the second ring. Power out on your end too? My voice felt like it belonged to someone else. Ellie, what would you do if you found something in writing? Something big, but wrong. Check who benefits, she said without hesitation, and look where they thought you wouldn't. I looked around the attic. Dust motes swirled in the weak light from the only window. My husband's voice came back to me like it was wrapped in wool. Don't let them push you out of what you've built. That old desk had been his. He always kept things there, tucked between old tax returns and favorite pens. He'd mentioned a folder once, something important. I'd forgotten, but he hadn't. The light flickered again, then silence. I reread the will twice, then the note. Julia's neat loops, the casual tone of someone doing a favor, not hiding a betrayal. I thought of the last brunch, the necklace, the laughter, the way no one looked up when I left. What else have they buried under my name? Back downstairs, I lit another candle. The soft wax scent filled the kitchen. I poured a cup of tea with hands that barely trembled. Then, with the rain still brushing against the windows and thunder grumbling far off, I opened the drawer by the phone and pulled out the address book. Most of the numbers were outdated, crossed out, scribbled over, but one stood out, faded, penciled in with hesitation. Under L. I hadn't called her in 15 years. I stared at it for a long moment, then dialed. The line clicked. A pause. Then a voice. Older. Deeper than I remembered. Hello? I drew a breath. I need a lawyer. The will they forged spoke louder than any words they'd ever said to my face. It was raining again when I stepped into Ms. Levin's office, the kind of soft, steady drizzle that seemed to apologize as it fell. Eleanor offered to come with me, and I let her, though she waited in the lobby with a magazine she didn't read. The office was quiet. Polished oak table. Cream-colored walls. A wall clock ticked gently above the bookshelf. My hands rested on a legal pad, but I wasn't writing. I was holding my late husband's watch, thumb brushing the back where his initials were faintly etched. HLA. Across from me, Ms. Levin studied the documents I'd brought in with silent precision. She wore thin glasses and a burgundy blazer, her hair pinned back, not a strand out of place. Calm, but never cold. She didn't rush. She didn't blink unnecessarily. And when she finally looked up, it was with the kind of stillness that makes your stomach shift before she speaks. Mrs. Andrews, she said gently, I've compared this signature to your medical directives, your mortgage closing documents, and the original will your husband filed before his passing. I nodded, barely. She flipped the page around so it faced me. This isn't your signature. My breath left me in a thin, dry line. They assumed you'd never look closely, she added. Most people don't, especially when it's family. I didn't respond right away. The silence stretched, thick as wool. I thought of all the times Adam had insisted on helping with my bills, back when I misread a payment date or forgot where I'd stashed a receipt. I used to call it forgetfulness. He used to call it helping. I looked down at the paper again. They had it notarized, I whispered. Ms. Levin nodded. You weren't there when it was signed. That's already a red flag. But there's more. She turned to her screen, clicked something, and brought up a scanned bank statement I hadn't seen before. Your pension checks. They've been rerouted. I blinked. What do you mean? Last year, a joint account was established in your name. That's where the direct deposits are landing. But the address listed belongs to your son. It felt like the floor shifted beneath my chair, like the office clock had gotten louder, each tick cutting through my ears. How long? At least 14 months? I stared at the screen. The amounts matched, the dates aligned. But the account wasn't mine. Not really. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even known. No more deposits for people who think I'm a burden, I said, my voice so steady it scared even me. Ms. Levin looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. We can begin with revoking access, filing a fraud report, and freezing activity until proper documents are restored, if you're ready. I remembered a day 5 years ago. The kitchen had smelled like cinnamon and lemon, Adam's favorite candle scent. He'd come over with Julia, both of them smiling too wide. Let's simplify your finances, Mom, he'd said. We'll help streamline everything. Less paperwork, less worry. I'd handed over documents with the same fingers I used to sew his kindergarten backpack. Now those fingers curled into fists in my lap. If you lose your name, I whispered, what's left? Ms. Levin pushed a folder toward me. What do you want to do next? I didn't reach for the folder right away. I reached for my checkbook, opened it, looked at the empty balance column. Then I quietly closed it and looked up. What do I need? I asked, to start taking back what's mine. You're too poor to matter. That's what my son said while I was holding his favorite pie. The sun was kind that morning, soft gold-filtered light pouring over rows of sunflowers, fresh basil, and kettle corn at the farmers market fundraiser. Our church had rented a little patch under a white tent for baked goods. I'd been up since 4 a.m., baking lemon chess pies, apple crumble, and my grandmother's molasses gingerbread. I even wore my best apron, the navy one with hand-stitched pockets. My hands still smelled like cinnamon and butter when I arrived. Adam wasn't supposed to come. He hadn't replied to the invite, but just before noon I saw his car pull up, sleek, black, unnecessarily loud. His wife stepped out first, already in conversation with a donor from the local credit union. Adam followed, sunglasses on, smile ready. Performative, I thought. Everything about him now was performative. Mom, he called loud enough to turn heads. Didn't know you were still making these. He gestured toward the pies like they were something foreign. I smiled politely, held out the lattice-topped apple pie he used to request every birthday. Brought your favorite. He took it. Didn't say thank you. The church ladies were buzzing around me, arranging tablecloths, chatting with customers. An acoustic guitarist strummed an old James Taylor tune. I caught sight of my grandson standing off to the side near the kettle corn booth. He raised a hand in a shy wave. I waved back. Then I heard it. Adam, speaking to someone I didn't recognize, laughing too loudly. We all pitch in for her bills. You think pie covers rent? The words sliced through me before I could even brace. She means well, he continued, but it's getting exhausting. Sentimental's not a strategy. We've had to step in. I stood still. My fingers tightened around the pie box I hadn't yet placed on the table. Someone near him chuckled awkwardly. Someone else turned to look at me. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I turned away and pretended to rearrange the cookie tins. A moment later, I heard his wife's voice, soft, smug, confident. Don't worry, it's all in our name anyway. She's just the face. Just the face. The pie in my hands felt heavier than it should have, like I was holding not just dessert, but history, holidays, apologies, birthdays we made due, a kitchen full of love and effort, a mother's offering dismissed in front of strangers. Something inside me crystallized. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I walked to the microphone near the center of the market where the organizers were thanking volunteers. I waited politely. When the pastor nodded to me, I stepped forward, apron still dusted with flour. "Thank you, everyone," I said, steady and clear. "Not just for supporting our church, but for teaching me something important today." The crowd hushed. That dignity doesn't live in approval, and that sometimes the most generous thing you can do is stop begging to belong. A beat of silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. I didn't wait for more. I walked back to the booth, packed my remaining pies gently into a box, and slid a note under the cash tin. "Use the rest for the youth program." As I zipped my tote closed, a small piece of paper fluttered to the ground. My grandson must have slipped it in. His handwriting, half print, half cursive, read, "I saw what he did. I'm proud of you." I bit the inside of my cheek until the sting passed. "If your worth is conditional," I whispered, "was it ever love at all?" Back home, I stood at the kitchen counter, watching the afternoon sun stretch long across the tile. My phone buzzed with a photo notification. Adam had tagged me in a group shot from earlier. I didn't even remember it being taken. I pressed Remove Tag, then opened his contact. "Delete contact?" the screen asked. "Yes," I said out loud, and then softer, like a prayer finally released. "He's not the center anymore." They left me at the airport, with my own luggage and no goodbye. The terminal hummed with bright overhead lights and echoing announcements, names I didn't recognize, destinations I wasn't headed to. My shawl clung to my shoulders in the air-conditioned draft. I stood by the arrivals board, fingers curled around the handle of a suitcase I had nearly forgotten how to pack. I kept scanning the crowd. No Adam, no Julia, no grandchildren running up with shy grins and sticky hands. Just me, alone. The last thing Adam's wife had said to me at drop-off floated back like smoke. "You'll just slow us down at the terminal. Meet us inside." She didn't smile when she said it, just tossed it over her shoulder while adjusting her designer sunglasses. I had believed her, believed they'd be inside waiting, that we'd all check in together, that maybe, just maybe, this trip would soften something, stitch a few seams in the places our family had frayed. But the check-in kiosk didn't recognize my name, and the gate agent, her blazer too tight at the shoulders, her lipstick too bright for this hour, looked up after typing a moment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you've been removed from the reservation." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I reached into my purse, pulling out the itinerary I'd printed 2 weeks ago. The flight number was right there. Departure, 10:05 a.m., Charleston. "There must be a mistake," I said, though even then my voice already knew the truth. The agent leaned closer, gentler now. "It says here someone on the account changed your booking yesterday. Did you authorize that?" I shook my head slowly. The air felt too thin. My phone buzzed, a message from Adam. "We figured it'd be simpler this way." "Sorry, Mom, we'll explain when we're back." Simpler. They made it simpler by leaving me behind. I stepped away from the counter. The sound of suitcase wheels clicking on tile echoed like applause I hadn't earned. I found a small cafe tucked by a wall of windows and sat. 2 older women next to me were chatting about grandkids and red wine tours. I ordered tea, left it untouched. At some point, I opened my purse again, not for my phone, not even for tissues, for the envelope, the one I hadn't dared look at since the attic, the will. I traced the crease of the seal, the lies behind it, the months I'd spent trying to earn the love that should have been freely given. My thumb found the edge of my boarding pass tucked inside, and just then, something fluttered to the ground. A torn itinerary. Not mine, Adam's, 2 copies, his flight, his wife's, the kids', but not mine. Not even a return trip. I was never in the plan. And suddenly, I remembered the Greyhound. That long trip I made after Adam's divorce. 42 hours of bus transfers and vending machine coffee. I sat in a drafty waiting room in Milwaukee for 6 hours, just to be near him, just to hold his hand and say, "You're not alone." I'd crossed the country, but today he couldn't cross a gate. My hand trembled as I held the boarding pass. It felt lighter now, as if it knew it didn't mean anything anymore. I looked around. Families reunited. Flight attendants lining up. Mothers wiping crumbs from little cheeks. Then slowly I tore my boarding pass in half. And again. And again. The pieces fell into the tea I hadn't touched. "If we only love mothers when we need them to wait," I whispered. "Is it really love?" I stood. The shawl slipped slightly, but I let it. My feet moved toward the exit with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not even sorrow, just release. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. The cab line stretched long. I didn't mind. I wasn't rushing anymore. Before stepping forward, I glanced once over my shoulder at the glass doors, the departure board, the security line I'd never join, and then I lifted my chin. They might have left me at the airport, but I wasn't the one lost. It took one envelope to silence every excuse they'd ever made. Sunday lunch. My house. The table was set for 10, though only 8 showed up. I still set the full spread anyway. Plates lined up with cloth napkins folded like fans. Apple pie cooling on the counter. Roast chicken. Green beans with almonds. Cornbread, too, just in case someone brought a friend. I stood by the window for a while before they arrived, watching the wind ruffle the flag in my neighbor's yard. I used to pray before family meals. Today I just breathed. One hand rested on my purse, the envelope tucked neatly inside. Julia came first. She was early for once. Her eyes darted around, unsure. Then Eleanor slipped into the hallway, taking her usual place near the coat rack, arms folded, quiet as always. She didn't need to say anything. She knew what this was. Then came Adam, loud, hugging like a politician, laughing too hard. "Smells like my childhood in here," he said, as if that were a compliment. His wife followed behind, sunglasses still on despite the cloudy afternoon. She gave me a kiss that landed somewhere near my cheek. I served the plates myself. When I sat down, I didn't lift my fork. I waited, because I knew he would bring it up. Adam cleared his throat halfway through the green beans. "So," he began, "Mom, there's been some confusion about the estate." I kept my gaze on my plate. He tried again, louder this time. "You know, with everything we've done to help you, I think the family deserves some clarity." Julia shifted in her seat. "I mean," Adam went on, "we've all pitched in. Bills, groceries, even the house repairs, right?" He looked around for support. Only his wife nodded. The others stayed quiet. "You've always said you wanted things to be fair," Adam added, voice tightening. "So, maybe now's the time to clarify the will situation." I reached for my purse. "I'm not confused," I said, unzipping it slowly. The zipper sound felt louder than it should have in that quiet room. I pulled out the envelope. Not thick, not dramatic, just final. "This is the real one," I said. "The one your father and I wrote before he passed. The one that was changed without my consent." Adam laughed. "Mom, come on, don't make this a scene." I didn't blink. "You forged my name, Adam." He froze. Julia reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded paper. "This," she said, "is a notarized receipt. I found it after the brunch. You used a courier to send documents in Mom's name. You paid for expedited service." She set it on the table like it was a napkin. Quiet, precise. I stood. "I'm not here to be grateful," I said. "Not to people who took what wasn't offered and claimed it was love." Adam's face reddened. "We supported you." "No," I said. "You controlled me. With guilt. With money. With silence." I unfolded the will and read aloud the one sentence that changed everything. "All decisions regarding the estate, medical or financial, are to be entrusted jointly to Julia Andrews and Evelyn Grace Andrews. No authority is granted to Adam George Andrews." He looked like someone had struck him across the chest. I placed the document down. "Love isn't a ledger, and you don't get to collect on mine anymore." Julia's hands trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I let it go on, because Adam helped with rent when I lost my job. I thought I owed him. I nodded once. You don't owe him anymore, but you can make it right. My grandchild stood up and walked around the table, sliding into the seat next to mine. I saw what you did, they said softly, at the market. I'm proud of you, Grandma. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I said. 2 words I hadn't used in weeks, not because I didn't feel gratitude, but because I hadn't felt seen. Eleanor's eyes met mine from the hallway. She didn't smile, just nodded, the way survivors do. Adam pushed back his chair. So that's it? You're cutting me out? No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. I'm just reading the receipt. He stood. His napkin dropped to the floor. No one picked it up. I turned to my grandchild and held out my hand. Come with me, I said. Let's build something different. And without waiting, I walked away from the table I had once bent over, backwards to set. I thought I was starting from scratch. But really, I was finally starting from me. The sun was warm that afternoon, not too hot, not too shy, just enough to coax old wood into smelling like spring and to make rosemary release its secrets into the breeze. I was in the backyard kneeling in soil with a trowel in one hand and half a glove on the other. Dirt clung under my nails like it had a right to be there. And for once, I didn't mind. Maybe I'll plant something this year, I had once said. My husband used to chuckle from the porch, paper folded in his lap. Don't bother, Maggie, it won't take. Too much shade. Turns out the shade wasn't in the yard. Eleanor appeared at the gate with a small pot in her hands. Brought you a gift, she said, holding out a seedling, delicate bright green, braver than it looked. From my granddaughter. She says it's heirloom basil, grows like stubborn women. I laughed, a real one. Not polite, not tight. Julia arrived not long after, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder, cheeks flushed like she'd run most of the way. I brought gloves, she said awkwardly, holding up a pair with sunflowers on the cuffs. Don't know how helpful I'll be. I handed her a spade. We'll find out. We dug in silence for a while, not tense, not empty, just shared. I showed her how to space out the lavender, how deep the soil needed to be. I even caught her smiling once when she sprinkled fertilizer like sugar on a cake. Then came the letter. A plain envelope stuck between a seed catalog and a coupon flyer in my mailbox. Cease and desist. From the desk of Adam G. Andrews, Esquino, a demand for financial restitution for decades of parental neglect. Signed by someone who'd never heard me sing lullabies in the dark or sit beside a hospital bed without sleep. I set the letter on the kitchen counter, unopened. I had no intention of feeding that kind of soil. Instead, I returned to the garden. My grandchild came by later, holding pruning shears too big for their hand. Can I help? They asked. I guided their fingers gently, showing them where to cut, how to leave room for the bloom. They listened closely, didn't rush. Roses bite back if you don't respect their space, I told them. They're like people then? Exactly, I said. As the sun shifted, I opened a dusty old drawer on the patio table, one I hadn't looked in since my husband passed. Inside, I found an envelope, yellowed, unsealed, a letter. My Maggie, I should have told you more. You were always bigger than this town, and I acted like it was a threat instead of a gift. I didn't support your dreams, and I know you folded them small just to keep the peace. I see it now. I'm sorry he never mailed it, but I read it like he had. And then I planted the cherry blossom, right in the center of the yard. No permission, no question. It would bloom in spring and scatter pink like confetti. I wanted something that made the air feel like a celebration, like a woman had stood her ground and watched something grow. Later, Julia wiped her forehead and said softly, I should have protected you sooner. I squeezed her hand. You still can. Starting now. We stood in the silence, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was full. What grows when you stop asking if it's worth planting? I murmured. Not long after, the garden gate creaked. A young woman stood there with a press badge and a canvas notebook. Hi, Mrs. Andrews? I'm from the Beacon Hill Weekly. We've had a few calls. I heard your teaching classes filled up. There's a waiting list." I blinked, then smiled, not for show, the kind that reached my eyes. "Would you like some tea?" I asked. "I'll pour. You can walk with me through what's growing." I didn't open the safe out of anger. I opened it because I was done being afraid. The sun had just shifted across my bedroom floor, catching in the fringe of the rug like it was holding on to something. I sat on the edge of the bed with a shoebox of mismatched keys in my lap. Some rusted, some unfamiliar. Most hadn't been touched in years. Behind the wardrobe was the old safe. It hummed faintly when I touched the keypad, as if it had been waiting, just like I had. My grandchild stood quietly in the doorway. They didn't ask what I was doing. They didn't need to. A few numbers, a soft click. The door opened. Dust clung to the edges like regret. But what waited inside wasn't what I expected. First, the deed. The original, signed only by me. No amendments, no joint signatures, no co-ownership with Adam, despite what he'd told relatives and realtors, and anyone who would listen. I exhaled. Next, a photograph. Me, graph. Standing next to my old sewing machine, back straight, smile genuine, and beside me a young Adam, missing a front tooth, arms crossed like he already had something to prove. On the back, in faded blue ink. "One day I'll make you proud." I pressed the photo to my chest for a moment, not because I believed it now, but because I had believed it once. There was more. My grandmother's recipe book, handwritten, oil-stained, brittle at the seams. Inside was a note I'd tucked between the pages when Julia was born. For someday, when I'm not the one baking the pies. And at the bottom of the safe, a birthday card, unopened, from Julia. The envelope was sealed, the handwriting hers, before the cursive smoothed into texts and emojis. I opened it carefully. "I don't always say it right, Mom, but I see you. I know what you gave up. Thank you for everything. I'll try to do better. Love, Julia." It had never been about whether they loved me. It had always been about what they thought I was for. I lifted the deed and placed it in a new folder labeled, "For Ms. Levin." I'd file it today, officially, publicly. No more room for doubt or manipulation. Outside, I could hear Eleanor's voice in the kitchen, gently humming as she put the kettle on. She hadn't asked questions, just showed up with scones and silence like only true friends do. "You need to teach," she'd said last week. "A class, a workshop, something. You've already taught me more than you know." I didn't laugh it off this time. Instead, I pulled out a clean sheet of paper, wrote across the top, "Legacy Scholarship for Daughters of Single Mothers." Because the truth doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it shows others the way out too. Later that afternoon, my grandchild and I sat in the garden, our knees brushing as we sketched out flower beds and tomato rows. I told them stories about their great-great-grandmother, about resilience sewn into hems, about years where the only thing I grew was patience. "Will you lock the safe again?" they asked. I smiled. "I will," I said, "but this time, it's empty." I stood, brushed the dirt from my hands, and slid the safe door closed, not as a hiding place, as a chapter turned. For years I saved seats, at recitals, birthdays, dinners. This time I saved one, for me. The room smelled like lavender and lemon polish. Tea lights flickered inside mason jars lining the windowsills of the Beacon Hill Community Center. Folding chairs formed two uneven rows, each with a cushion tied on, some floral, some plain. But mine, it had my name stitched in navy thread, Margaret. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where you can hear your own breath. I stood at the front of the room, hands steady, a stack of pamphlets beside me titled Stitching Strength, Financial and Emotional Boundaries for Women. 55 plus. 15 women filled the seats. They came with notebooks and cardigans and stories you could feel in the air. Eleanor introduced me with a nod more than a speech. Julia set a still warm apple pie on the refreshment table. She caught my eye, smiled shyly. I nodded back. "I'm Margaret," I said. "I used to think being needed was the same as being loved." A few women leaned in. "I'm here because I unlearned that, slowly, painfully. But I did." I walked them through the basics: how to read a will, how to spot red flags in financial access, how to say no without apology, how to protect what's yours when the people you love forget that it is yours. They listened like women who hadn't been listened to in years. Then I said, "Let's hear your stories." The room shifted. One woman raised her hand, then another. A third stood without waiting. "I used to think I was the only one," she said, voice shaking. "I'm not, thank you." There were tears, but not the kind that make you smaller. These ones made room. We passed around cookies Eleanor had baked, cinnamon sugar with just a hint of orange zest. Julia had made place cards for the next session already. My grandchild arranged them alphabetically. Then it happened. A manila envelope was handed to me, mid-session. Inside, a printed statement from Adam to the local paper. "My mother is falsifying family history for sympathy. There was no mistreatment, only love she refused to recognize." I read it aloud. Let the silence answer. And then I folded it, neatly, slowly, placed it beneath the pie tin. "I'm not here to correct him," I said. "I'm here to stop hiding from the truth." The room held still. Then I offered what I'd been saving for the very end. Not a lecture, not advice, just a sentence that had taken me 70 years to say out loud. "You're not too much. You were just too much for people who wanted you small." The women exhaled. Julia signed up to co-teach the next session. Eleanor stayed late to wash dishes. My grandchild stacked chairs and swept the floor with a hum in their voice. We didn't lock the door until dusk. As I gathered my things, I glanced at the chair beside mine. Empty, but not forgotten. It would stay that way. Because now, the seat I'd saved wasn't for someone who might show up. It was for someone who already had. Me. When everyone had left and the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, I stayed behind. The mason jars still flickered on the windowsills, their tea lights dancing like small, defiant stars. My fingers lingered on the back of my stitched cushion. Margaret. I traced each letter slowly, like I was reminding myself that I had finally claimed something that was always mine. Across the room, the folding chairs sat in crooked rows, evidence of real people and real conversations. There had been laughter, tears, stories of pensions rerouted, of daughters who only called when rent was due, of sons who moved into guest rooms and never left until they brought lawyers with them. It was more than a class. It was a reckoning. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty parking lot. The wind stirred the petals of the dogwood tree outside, the same tree Eleanor had planted after her divorce. New roots, she'd said back then, no matter how old the soil. Julia came back in quietly. She carried the pie tin and 2 forks. "I thought we could have a slice, just us." She placed it on the small table near the front. No fine china, just paper plates and the truth. "I read the letter he sent," she said, her voice low. "It was cruel." I didn't answer right away. I was tired of filling silences that weren't mine to carry. "I used to defend him," she admitted, "even when I knew better." I met her eyes. So did I. The first bite of pie was sweet, cinnamon heavy, the kind you remember years from now, not because of the taste, but because of what it meant. Julia smiled at me through glassy eyes. "I've been thinking, maybe we should start something, a space like this, but ongoing, not just workshops, a community." I blinked, not because I was surprised, but because something inside me, some quiet hope I thought had died, stirred again. She continued, "We could help women figure things out before it's too late. Legal stuff, emotional stuff. We could call it stitching strength, like your class." I touched the edge of the pamphlet. "You really want to?" Julia nodded. You've done more in a month than most people do in a lifetime of waiting to be picked." Across the room, my grandchild peeked in. "Need help carrying anything to the car, Grandma?" "No," I said, standing straighter, "but thank you for asking." Their smile was real, the kind that doesn't just stretch your face, but your heart, too. We packed in silence, comfortable silence. And as Julia locked the door behind us, I looked down at the seat I'd saved, still empty. Not because no one was worthy, but because I wasn't waiting anymore. That night at home, I placed the stitched cushion on my sewing chair, the one where I used to hem uniforms and prom dresses, the one Adam called old-fashioned and Julia once spilled nail polish on, the one that had always supported more than just my weight. I sat down, breathed in, and opened my laptop. The website was still blank, a white screen waiting to be filled. I typed, "Welcome to Stitching Strength." Helping women over 55 reclaim their finances, their stories, and themselves. Below it, I added a quote. Not mine, my grandmother's. "A woman who knows what she's worth never folds herself to fit." The next day, Eleanor brought a tin of cookies and a stack of notebooks. Julia arrived with a printer and a calendar. My grandchild volunteered to handle social media. And just like that, the next season began. It didn't have to be big. It just had to be real. We planned monthly meetups, workshops on wills and power of attorney, sessions about emotional labor and saying no without guilt. And yes, we left a seat open at every table, but only for those who showed up with respect in their hearts. If you've ever saved a seat for someone who never came, save one now for yourself. Because healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives in small rooms with folding chairs and lemon pie. Sometimes it sounds like your own name, stitched into the cushion, spoken with pride, not apology. And sometimes the seat you save ends up being the most powerful place in the room. That night, as I sat beside the last folding chair in the quiet room, I didn't feel angry anymore, just clear. Not everything broken needs to be fixed with forgiveness. Sometimes the lesson is in the walking away. If life has taught me anything, it's this. Love should never be confused with obligation. We can honor our past without letting it chain us to people who no longer see our worth. And if you're still saving seats for those who don't show up, maybe it's time to set one for yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. If any part of this story spoke to you, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments. After all, it's in telling our truths that we help others find their own.